Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Colombian heavyweight Oscar Rivas, who resides in Canada, has been confirmed on the Beterbiev Meng undercard in Quebec City for March the 28th. So he will be fighting Devin Vargas, a former Olympian. Now, this is a fight that I think many fans would have been thinking, it would have been better to have a bigger name than Vargas, a better test for Oscar Rivas. But I guess with Rivas being out of the ring since July 2019 when he lost to Dwight White, he needs a bit of action, some rounds to sort of get him back in the swing of things. And I guess this is what this Devin Vargas fight sort of fulfills for him. But what I'll do is I'll get to a few of the comments and statements from the press release and quote from Oscar Rivas, and then on to a few thoughts. And there's a few interesting things that are being said in the press release that I wanted to sort of touch on and unpack. So starting with the comments from Top Rank, which sort of precede the quote. So they say, Rivas, 26 and 118 KOs, who recently signed a co-promotional deal with Top Rank, had an action-packed 2019. He knocked out former world title challenger Bryant Jennings in January and knocked down and nearly knocked out Dwight White in July before dropping a unanimous decision for the WBC interim heavyweight world title. Ranked number 3 in the WBC, Rivas is still in the thick of the heavyweight mix despite the White loss. Vargas, 22 wins, 6 losses, 9 KOs, revitalized his career in January with an upset victory over 2004 Puerto Rican Olympian Victor Bisbal. Last August, he knocked out the unbeaten Irish prospect Niall Kennedy in 5 rounds. This past year, I have proven, and this is Rivas, I am one of the world's elite heavyweights. This year, my goal is to prove that I deserve my chance to take on the best heavyweight boxer in the world, Tyson Fury, who is also under contract with Top Rank. On March 28, I will smash my opponent with a spectacular kaboom. And kaboom being Oscar Rivas' nickname. So there's a bit to sort of get to and unpack there, but I'll start with the Fury comments first because I think that is some optimistic thinking. Rivas is nowhere really in the conversation for a Tyson Fury fight anytime in 2020. Maybe if it had been 2019 and he was going to be one of the opponents that he fought first on the Top Rank deal, and there was some talk that Rivas was one of the names that was under consideration. Ultimately, Tom Schwartz and Otto Wallin got those 2 fights that Fury had in 2019. But of his chances in 2020, no show in my view. Deontay Wilder has got the trilogy fight with Fury. They're talking about July for that fight. And then Tyson Fury, should he win it, he will be looking elsewhere, and that elsewhere could be an undisputed fight with either Anthony Joshua or Kubrat Pulev, whoever wins that fight, which is going to be in June. And also Dwight White is Fury's WBC mandatory. So they are a couple of fights. He's mentioned Joshua and White that could he wants to have before retiring. But he said a number of things about retirement. But the Joshua one in particular, if Joshua keeps winning, is one that could be, for all the marbles and a massive fight in the heavyweight division. So I like what Rivas is saying there in terms of wanting that fight, but getting it is an altogether different matter. But of the quote there that he's proven he's one of the world's elite heavyweights, he's a very good heavyweight, and I have him in my inside my top 15. But elite, that's a very big word to throw around. I mean, Otto Wallin, he threw around elite after he lost to Tyson Fury. The thing is, though, if you're going to call yourself elite, you've got to have some big wins on your resume. And Oscar Rivas doesn't actually have that. And when you consider his body of work as a whole, his resume is rather thin. And some of that has come about from bad luck and in part from an eye injury that he had sustained, and he couldn't get licensed in the United States for some time. But he seems to have cleared those issues now. Obviously, he had the fight with Dwight White in 2019, but ultimately he lost that one. He gave a good account of himself, but he still did lose. And when they talk about and nearly knocked out Dwight White, that really sort of is gilding the lily to some extent, because ultimately Dwight White, it was a flash knockdown. He was sort of going along the ropes, crossed his legs, got caught by a good shot by Oscar Rivas, an uppercut, and he went down. But White didn't really look in any real trouble. He beat the count handily enough, so that is trying to hype it up a little bit. But I guess in terms of the other other comments that he's still in the thick of the heavyweight mix despite the loss to White, yeah, I completely agree. Oscar Rivas is a talented heavyweight and he's going to be in some good fights. Do I think he can win a heavyweight title? I'm not so sure, but he can be in some very good fights, and he was in one with White back in July 2019. And we'll come to this Vargas fight in a second, but yeah, Oscar Rivas currently has a ranking of number 3 in the WBC. That has been boosted because he appealed to the WBC back in October at their convention and said, look, all the stuff with the what happened with Dillian White and the gloves, they weren't able to inspect them ahead of the fight, etc. And the WBC seemingly listened to that, boosted him up the rankings to number 5 at the time. And now he's climbed to number 3. And with the rankings changing, and if he keeps winning, he's going to be in a big fight soon, either in a final eliminator or an eliminator in the WBC. Or at least someone will target that ranking and go, Oscar Rivas, he's a good name, we can put on a good event, make some money, and I can take his number 3 ranking, which could potentially climb higher if Alexander Usyk drops out of the WBC at some point, remembering he's the WBO mandatory challenger, and the rankings still need to be updated after Tyson Fury's win over Deontay Wilder. But of Devin Vargas, he has this fight because of that win over Victor Bisbal. So it's a good situation for Vargas, because he wasn't meant to have that fight with Bisbal. Originally, it was meant to be Ajit Kabial. That was meant to be his ESPN and Top Rank first fight on his new co-promotional arrangements. Kabial also promoted by SES Boxing, but visa issues put paid to that. Vargas steps in. He has a real bruising and fun fight with Victor Bisbal, who ultimately was DQ'd because of multiple fouls. There was all sorts of stuff he was doing, and Vargas really did put on a good performance in that fight. It was a bit of a slugfest. So he's earned himself another payday, probably better than he was otherwise getting before the Bisbal fight. So I, can't begrudge Devin Vargas for taking this fight, because for him, at 38 years old, he's looking to cash in while he can, but he is the opponent and he has been knocked out 5 times before. And remembering Andy Ruiz Jr., when he returned from his year-plus hiatus after his loss to Joseph Parker, Vargas was the guy that was brought in as a tune-up. Andy Ruiz sparked him. Other losses on his record from earlier in his career, losing to the likes of Jason Bergman, Kevin Johnson, etc. So he has a level, he's sort of a gatekeeper type fighter at this point, and obviously the win over Bisbal sort of gives him a little bit of momentum heading into this fight, but it is what it is. It's a tune-up for Rivas. And I know not everyone is going to like this, and fair enough, because obviously Devin Vargas versus Oscar Rivas, if Rivas is saying he's elite, it's not the sort of opponent you want to see. But ultimately, because he's been out of the ring for so long, I can sort of deal with it and see it for what it is. Hopefully he's on to bigger and better fights later in 2020. And specifically, it would be good to see him in with the likes of an Ajit Kabial. Others in the Top Rank stable. What about Jarrell Miller? There's a number of fights that can be made now in the Top Rank stable because they've actually boosted their stocks. Even a Carlos Takam would be a much better opponent than Devin Vargas, and a step up in terms of quality, and Carlos Takam certainly beatable these days. He's an aging fighter himself. But what do you make of this? Devin Vargas, Oscar Rivas, March the 28th. It's going to be on the Beterbiev Meng undercard in Quebec City. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.